Imagine this. It's April 7th, 2026, and the world is holding its breath. A deadline handed down by the President of the United States to Iran is just hours away from expiring. And as that clock ticks down, a single social media post sends a massive shockwave across the globe.
And that message? It came directly from President Donald Trump. This wasn't some secret diplomatic cable. This was a public declaration for everyone to see. World leaders were scrambling, analysts were just stunned. Had the most powerful man in the world just threatened to use nuclear weapons? For a lot of folks, that was the only way to read it.
You know, a threat like that, to wipe an entire civilization off the map, it doesn't just come out of nowhere, right? It's the end result of a whole series of events, of miscalculations, of escalations. So how did we get here? Let's unpack the whole story of how a regional war spiraled into a full-blown global crisis.
All right, to really get what was happening on April 7th, we have to rewind the clock. We're going back 50 days, right to the beginning of a conflict that, well, it spiraled out of control, and fast.
But before we get into all the politics and the strategy, let's be really clear about the human cost. Since this war started on February 28th, we're talking over 4,000 people killed. Think about that. Over 2,000 in Iran, more than 2,100 in Lebanon, alongside 26 Israeli and 13 American soldiers. And look, these aren't just numbers on a screen. Every single one represents a family shattered, and millions have been forced from their homes.
And what's really terrifying is just how fast all of this happened. So the war kicks off on February 28th. Not even a month later, on March 21st, the US and Israel are hitting Iran's nuclear sites. I mean, talk about a risky move. Then, boom, April 3rd, the conflict becomes direct. An American fighter jet gets shot down. And just 4 days after that, we get that apocalyptic threat. It was like climbing a ladder straight towards a catastrophic war. Now, while all of this was going on, the official story coming out of the White House was completely different. It was all about overwhelming victory. President Trump kept saying, "We won, okay? We have total air dominance. Iran is defeated. The war is effectively over." And then, this happens. April 3rd, Iran shoots down an American F-15E Strike Eagle. In that one moment, the entire American narrative of air superiority was just shattered. Iran showed the world it could still land a major punch, and that single event kicked off a whole new and very dramatic phase of this crisis. So that shootdown, it immediately triggered this incredibly high-stakes rescue mission. See, it wasn't just about losing a plane. There were 2 American crew members now on the ground inside Iran, and the race to get them out was on.
And the stakes here? They were just immense. If Iran captured an American pilot, it would be a huge propaganda win for them and a massive embarrassment for the president. One crew member was rescued pretty quickly, but the other was missing. For more than 24 hours, this guy is injured, hiking up to 7,000 feet, trying to survive. And then he manages to get out a simple 3-word radio message: "God is good." Meanwhile, the CIA is playing chess, putting out false info that he's already been rescued to throw the Iranians off the scent. Then, using airstrikes as cover, hundreds of Delta Force and Navy SEALs go in, and against all odds, they get him out.
So, 2 days later, President Trump goes public with the news, and the message is crystal clear: we got him. He paints this picture of a flawless mission, one that was done without any damage, and says it's just more proof of America's full control of the skies over Iran. But the reality on the ground? Well, that told a very different story. And this is where you really see the gap between the political spin and the military facts. Yes, the airman was saved, which is incredible, but it came at a huge cost. An A-10 Warthog went down, 2 Black Hawk helicopters took enemy fire, and 2 transport planes were so badly damaged they had to be destroyed right there on Iranian soil. So, a successful rescue? Absolutely. But a clean, cost-free operation? Not even close. So, tensions are at a boiling point, right? That April 7th deadline is ticking closer and closer. It feels like all-out war is basically guaranteed. And then, something totally unexpected happens. Out of nowhere, a surprising diplomatic channel opens up. I mean, we are literally 90 minutes away from Trump's deadline expiring. And just then, the world pulls back from the brink. In what was just a stunning diplomatic play, Pakistan gets both the US and Iran to agree to a 2-week ceasefire. For a second there, it really looked like dialogue was going to win the day. But when the 2 sides actually sat down in Pakistan to talk, they hit a brick wall. And it all came down to one thing: Iran's nuclear program. The US position was firm: dismantle it completely, permanently. Iran's offer? They'd suspend it for 5 years. That gap was just way too big. The talks completely fell apart.
And the second those talks failed, the consequences were immediate. President Trump announced a full naval blockade of every single Iranian port. The goal? To choke off all of their oil exports, even to friendly countries like China. The economic war was now on, big time.
And that brings us right up to today, to this incredibly volatile and uncertain situation. The days since those talks collapsed have just been a total whirlwind of confusing moves and rising danger. And all the while, that temporary ceasefire clock is ticking down.
I mean, just look at the chaos of the last few days. It says everything. On April 17th, Iran does something surprising and opens up the vital Strait of Hormuz. But then, just one day later, they do a complete 180, shut it down again, and even fire on Indian merchant ships. And remember, all of this is happening as we get closer and closer to April 22nd, the day that fragile ceasefire is set to end.
So that's where we are. And it leaves us with the big, unanswered question. The clock is almost run out. Diplomacy has failed. The military and economic pressure is through the roof. With no clear path forward, the entire world is once again just watching and waiting to see what happens next.